Here we go.
Welcome back, ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy. We live in the golden age of superhero movies. Superheroes are everywhere. These movies dominate the box office. They are the biggest events of the year, and it's been this way for decades. And more importantly, many of these movies are actually good. Some of them are even considered works of art. But how did we get here? When did this golden age start? Well, it can all be traced back to one masterful trilogy. Christopher Nolan's Batman films changed the game forever.
There's no going back. You've changed things. Forever.
Batman Begins and The Dark Knight completely shifted the perception around comic book movies. What was once perceived as campy and cartoonish flicks are now cherished and upheld to the highest cinematic standard. 17 years after Nolan reinvented Batman, we are still witnessing the influence and legacy of his Dark Knight trilogy. So let's return to the very inception of the superhero golden age and explore how the modern-day cinematic blockbusters were born by these incredible films that changed this genre forever.
When we were looking at the sort of cinematic landscape coming up to Batman Begins, it felt like a very long time since I'd seen the tone of movie that had defined the blockbuster for me as a kid.
The Dark Knight trilogy didn't just influence almost every superhero film that followed it, but it also saved the entire genre. This is why we need to start with a little trip down memory lane and explore how the Dark Knight trilogy saved the superhero movie. Superman 1 and 2 were the first major movies that changed the perception of the superhero genre, serving as proof that comic books could be adapted into both good and profitable movies. Then came the Superman sequels, basically undid all of that in the most terrible way possible. Shortly after, Batman '89 came out and reinvented Batman, giving us our first dark interpretation of a major superhero. For anyone who didn't read the comics at the time, the assumption was that Batman was this. And then Batman and the Nipples came out, and suddenly this didn't seem that bad.
7 million. Never leave the cave without it.
As both of DC's biggest franchises ran into the ground, it was Marvel's turn to shine. And many of Marvel's first movies were very good. Some are even great.
They love me.
But very quickly, bad quality threatened the superhero genre once again. All of this led to an unavoidable negative perception of comic book-based movies. For decades, audiences saw comics as nothing more than silly cartoons made for kids. Even after the whole industry was reinvented with graphic novels such as Watchmen, Dark Knight Returns, Born Again, people who didn't read comics simply didn't take those stories and characters seriously. And as superhero movies came and went, this preconceived notion carried over to the big screen. Especially because most of these films came crashing down and leaving the worst taste in everyone's mouths.
It's horrible. Horrible. Just horrible.
Even great films like Spider-Man 2 couldn't escape this perception. And perception is everything. It can make or break any movie. Back in the early 2000s, the overall perception of superhero movies was pretty bad. The audience didn't take these movies seriously, which made the studios doubt if this genre was even worth the risk. Superhero movies needed a paradigm shift in perception. And then, a miracle happened.
What the hell are you? I'm Batman.
Christopher Nolan, a visionary filmmaker, a completely unknown director with only 3 films to his name. Nolan had a story, a vision, and he made the one film that will change, it changed everything. Batman Begins was a mountable turning point for the superhero genre. It was a complete and masterful reinvention of one of the most iconic characters ever. For the first time, a comic book character was being taken seriously on the big screen. The first time someone dove into the complexity of the Dark Knight. The first time anyone actually cared about making a film with real weight and validity. This wasn't just a superhero movie, nor a Batman movie. This was cinema at its finest.
If you make yourself more than just a man, if you devote yourself to an ideal, then you become something else entirely. Legend, Mr. Wayne.
And once The Dark Knight came out, any doubt or negative perception of the genre was slapped away.
What the hell are you doing?
Larry!
Larry, you can't just... Oh,
Larry! Oh, are you alright? How did...
Larry!
Also, Batman is just so...
Hey, Why are you wearing glasses today? You're trying to look smart or something?
No, I have a prescription. I just have a hard time finding the right glasses for me. So how do these look?
Good. You look smart.
Thanks. I got these from GlassesUSA.com. They're the sponsor of this video. First of all, I love how affordable these glasses are. They cut out the middleman, so they're able to offer prescription eyewear for up to 70% off retail prices. Frames and lenses start at $30, and free basic prescription lenses are included free with every frame. You also get free shipping and returns, a 14-day 100% money-back guarantee, and a full-year warranty. But mostly, I like the wide variety that you get from shopping online. Glasses USA offers more than 6,000 styles of eyeglasses and sunglasses, including designer brands like Ray-Ban, Oakley, Gucci, and many more. I have 3 pairs. These are Muse, Guilford, and Blue. I always wanted a pair of blue frames, but it was too much of a commitment to try it out. But Glasses USA is so affordable that you can have fun and experiment. For instance, these glasses are called Port, and I love how perfectly they fit my face. And these are the Muse M sunglasses, easily the nicest sunglasses that I have ever owned. They also have a virtual mirror that lets you upload the glasses and see how they look online.
Can I try?
Sure, go ahead. These look great on you. And you can also see how Michael Keaton's Batman would look in a pair. So click our link in the description to check out all the frames that Glasses USA has to offer. Back to Batman. Batman Begins was the start of a true golden age, and The Dark Knight cemented it, made it everlasting. Arguably, the influence of Batman Begins and The Dark Knight was as instrumental as the Godfather trilogy and Star Wars. These films shifted the whole trajectory of superhero movies. They changed the way the audience saw them, and they injected a whole new confidence in the studios. Now, I totally admit that there's no denying that 2012's Avengers probably had the biggest mark on the genre. The extraordinary accomplishments of that movie had jump-started the most successful film franchise in history. Nothing has ever been the same since then. This is why the MCU dominates Hollywood. But arguably, the Avengers never would have been taken as seriously as it was if not for Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. A rising tide raises all ships. The effect of Nolan's Batman had on the industry completely changed the perspective, creating a whole new expectation from comic book movies.
I never said thank you.
And you'll never have to.
Nolan set the highest bar possible, and studios understood that they must follow in the filmmaker's lead. After The Dark Knight, the audience expected all movies to hold up to the same standard, so anything less was unacceptable. In the past, superhero movies were judged as superhero movies, not as real films. But now, there's no difference.
I have never really thought about doing a comic book movie. It really came from how do you make a great character study and get people to want to see it?
While of course there are the expectations of these movies to follow certain tropes of the genre, but we tend to celebrate those films that break free from the restrictions of the genre. Those movies that try and even achieve in reinventing the wheel, and further cement comic book-based movies as a true form of cinema, and not just theme park rides.
I feel like for all the money the pictures made, as good as the movies are, these movies are sadly underappreciated as works of art and as works of drama.
Now, mind you, when I talk about the influence of Batman Begins and The Dark Knight, I'm not saying that other movies copied from Nolan. Well, actually, many did just that. Hollywood had a very long phase of trying to mimic every aspect of the Dark Knight trilogy, like making everything dark, gritty, and realistic. But I'm talking about studios and filmmakers learning from what Nolan did, and trying to maintain the same quality of storytelling, and at the same time, even trying to raise the bar even higher. As the saying goes, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery. And I guess if you imitate someone, you should imitate the best. Nolan brilliantly merged spectacle and substance, creating a cinematic blockbuster filled with epic scale action and visuals. But underneath it all, these movies were psychological crime thrillers, provoking audiences to pay attention and think. Nolan recognized one of the most crucial flaws in past superhero movies, that the audience simply didn't care that much about the stories and the characters, mainly because of the simplicity of it all. Superhero movies used to be all about the spectacle. The audience came to watch the hero fight bad guys. Whenever the hero was out of the suit, it felt like the movie was just buying its time till the next big action sequence. To amend that, Nolan put his focus on creating compelling and complex characters, not campy characters. After the Dark Knight films, there was a demand for these movies to be more sophisticated. The audience wanted to see complex characters, as opposed to simplistic stories about good versus evil. Nolan made us care about Bruce Wayne's journey of self-discovery and purpose. Nolan established Batman with a 3-act structure, first by focusing on Bruce Wayne at his lowest point, establishing why he wants to become a hero. Act 2 explores how he becomes Batman. And finally, the 3rd act is about Batman's rise and transformation into a hero.
I shouldn't be alive. Unless it was for a reason. I just finally know what I have to do.
One of the biggest influences of the Dark Knight trilogy was placing characters in a believable world. Not realistic, but grounded. It's a heightened reality that only mirrors the real world, or, as Nolan calls it,
A cinematic reality.
what this achieves is that if the world the hero occupies has weight and validity, then we, as the audience, can take the hero seriously. It doesn't matter if the hero is a guy dressed like a bat, or a super soldier, or even an alien god. If the movie makes the hero and story believable, and the movie doesn't make fun of the ridiculousness of all this, then it feels more tangible to the audience.
It's about giving the world of the films and the characters as much weight and validity as they would if your source material were not a comic book.
In my opinion, the interrogation scene in Dark Knight is one of the best moments in any superhero movie. The acting is out of this world, the intensity reaches a boiling point, and this entire conversation has more nuance than you find in most movies. And mind you that it's a guy dressed in a bat talking to a guy in clown makeup, but it never takes us out of the scene because of how believable the world is, how much we are invested in this story.
You complete me.
You're garbage who kills for money.
Don't talk like one of them. You're not. Even if you'd like to be.
This is why we can accept and care for a talking raccoon, or cry our eyes out when a talking tree dies. Another thing the Dark Knight movies established with this cinematic realism is functionality over form and substance over style. Everything has some basis in the real world, which makes the fantastical elements feel believable. This is why the MCU explains the science behind Iron Man's suit, why the fundamentals of magic are defined as science, why even time travel has an explanation.
Your ancestors called it magic, and you call it science. Well, I come from a place where they're one and the same thing.
There's also the influence on the kind of threats heroes face. The villains capitalize on terror, panic, and chaos. All three films focus on the theme of fear, mirroring America's own fear of terror after 9/11. And by doing this, Nolan brings these movies closer to home. The hero doesn't face some abstract evil, but something we resonate with. Once again, making the world feel more believable. This automatically raises the stakes of the conflict. The Dark Knight trilogy was also one of the first times when a director understood that the richness of the source material couldn't be ignored. Sam Raimi also did that with Spider-Man, for the most part.
Go, Webb, go!
But Nolan understood that when it comes to adapting the comics, it's basically impossible to do a truly faithful adaptation, both because there are so many stories and iterations of Batman, but also because storytelling in a comic book or graphic novel is fundamentally different from film.
It's like a religion. Each man has his own Jesus. Your Jesus can be vengeful and righteous, and my Jesus can be forgiving and loving, and there's no right Jesus in the same way that there's no right Batman.
And the most important aspect of storytelling is to tell a good story. Fan service is nice, but it's not a substitute for good storytelling. And so, Nolan and many filmmakers after him found the best of all worlds solution, which is to understand the core aspects of the character and adapt those respectfully, but never lose sight of telling a good story. There's also more personal exploration of the stakes in the stories. The Dark Knight isn't just a movie after Batman Begins, it's a movie about consequences. All of Batman's choices come into question in the sequel, as he must face the escalation of his actions in the previous movie.
So you think Batman's made Gotham a better place?
You see, this is how crazy Batman's made Gotham.
The Joker represents that escalation by presenting what happens when a masked vigilante takes the law into his own hands. This undermines the law, and it creates people like the Joker. It's cause and effect, as one thing leads to the other, creating tangible stakes. And this can also be seen in the MCU. The alien invasion in New York leads to Tony Stark creating Ultron. Ultron is the reason Sokovia gets destroyed, and this leads to the Sokovia Accords and Zemo, and that leads to Civil War. The Avengers disassembling leads to Thanos winning an Infinity War, which then directly leads into Endgame. Each action has consequences, both good and bad. Like in the real world, nothing is simple. The hero's choices always lead to some form of escalation.
You're gonna go to war. That son of a bitch brought the war to us 2 years ago.
There's also a behind-the-scenes factor. Now today, Christopher Nolan is one of the greatest and most well-known directors of our age, likely to be remembered as one of the best of all time. But back in 2005, Nolan was a complete unknown with only 3 small-budget films to his name. Yet, he had a clear vision, and Warner Brothers trusted him with $100 million and one of their biggest franchises. It was Nolan's approach and vision which eventually led to these masterpieces. This also gave other studios the confidence to entrust these massive movies with less experienced directors, believing that it's the visionary filmmaker who should take the helm of some of the biggest superhero movies of all time. I mean, before Captain America the Winter Soldier, the Russo brothers only worked on 3 movies, all very small, and they directed tons of sitcom episodes. And yet, Marvel Studios trusted them. And I think it's safe to say that the gamble paid off.
You could not give a normal performance. You could not give an ordinary performance. You had to project massive energy through this costume in order to not question the costume.
There's also the casting in these films. See, big stars have always been a big part of superhero movies. They were part of the draw. But Batman Begins and Dark Knight didn't just rely on big stars, but instead some of the most talented character actors in the business. Heath Ledger's masterful performance as the Joker is unmatched, and it showed just how much prestige these films can have with the right talent. It provoked other actors to put in their A game, and the better the performance is, the more weight and legitimacy the film has.
Really, I'm standing here on the shoulders of my favorite actor, Heath Ledger. So thank you and good night.
Now, we could go over how these films influenced the genre all day, but I think you get the point. What's so important is the impact these films had on the genre and the industry as a whole. Superhero movies are the biggest events of every year. It speaks volumes that Spider-Man No Way Home is racing toward being one of the most successful movies of all time, despite a global pandemic. But more importantly, it says a lot that over a decade later, superhero movies are still dominating, and most are really good. In the end, Christopher Nolan's Batman films are the gold standard. Their influence will forever echo across the superhero genre, and as long as studios remember what made those films so good, the superhero genre will be everlasting.
The movies are already watermarks of what can be done. Things to aspire to shoot for, they will forever be reflective of the highest possible way of telling this type of story in our time, with the intelligence and the passion in which we embrace the medium.
Again, special thanks to Glasses USA for sponsoring this video. Be sure to click their link down in the description. So, what do you think about all this? Let us know your comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.